real stories of werewolves, of dogman from history, from your emails, illustrated and animated with the democratizing magic of machine learning AI. Welcome to Scary Stories.
The Mystery of the Dogman. Dear Scary Stories NYC. It started when I had to take the garbage out on Wednesday night. It felt like the garbage can sort of always mocked me each Wednesday. Heavy metallic sentinels standing guard at the edge of my driveway, collecting the week's discarded remnants. I had moved to this quiet suburban neighborhood 6 months ago, hoping for something resembling peace after years of city chaos. Streetlights cast weak amber pools across the asphalt, creating shadows that stretched like nervous fingers. My kitchen clock had just clicked past 11 when I realized I had forgotten to take out the trash. Again. I grabbed the black plastic bag, its contents containing crumpled takeout containers and yesterday's coffee grounds. The screen door creaked, always the same tired sound, as I stepped out onto the concrete walkway. Cool air brushed against my bare arms, carrying a strange stillness with it that felt wrong. At first I didn't see it. Then, movement caught my peripheral vision. Something shifted between my neighbor's hedges and the recycling bins. Not a raccoon. Not a stray dog. Something different. It stood impossibly tall, hunched yet massive, with a silhouette that defied natural anatomy. Fur, or was it matted hair, seemed to absorb what little light existed. Its proportions were very wrong, grotesquely wrong, human-like in structure but fundamentally not. Our eyes met, yellow, intelligent. Time stopped. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears, a frantic drumroll of pure terror. Every muscle in my body screamed to run, but primitive fear had welded my feet to the ground. The creature didn't move. It simply watched. Then, a low sound emerged. Not quite a growl, not quite a breath. Something between a whisper and a rumble that seemed to bypass my ears and vibrate directly through my bones. My brain finally reconnected with my legs. I bolted. The screen door slammed behind me with such force that I was certain the frame would splinter. Breath ragged, hands shaking, I pressed my back against the interior wall. Sweat beaded across my forehead despite the evening's chill. Outside, absolute silence returned. No rustling, no movement, just darkness and those waiting garbage cans. I wouldn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every shadow seemed to hold potential for that impossible shape to re-emerge. My mind raced with questions. What was it? Where did it come from? And more terrifyingly, would it return? Little did I know then that this was just the beginning of something far more unsettling than a single unexplained encounter. The days following that night became an exercise in deliberate rationalization. I told myself it was a trick of light, an overactive imagination, a momentary hallucination brought on by stress and too many late nights at the accounting firm. My colleagues noticed something was off. Jake, who sits in the cubicle next to mine, kept asking if I was feeling all right. Dark circles had taken up permanent residence under my eyes, and my usual meticulously organized workspace now looked like a scattered collection of half-finished reports and crumpled coffee cups. I'm fine, I'd say, the words sounding hollow even to my own ears. My mother was the first to press harder. We spoke on a Sunday afternoon, her voice crackling through the phone line with a familiar mixture of concern and mild interrogation. You sound exhausted, honey, she said. Are you eating properly? Are you working too hard? I couldn't tell her about the creature I'd seen. How could I explain something I'd barely understood myself? Instead, I deflected. Just a rough patch at work, I mumbled, twirling the phone cord around my finger, an old habit that somehow grounded me. That night, the first strange light appeared. It wasn't dramatic, at least not at first. Just a pinprick of intensity against the night sky. bright enough to catch my attention as I stood by the kitchen window. Pale blue-white, utterly still, suspended just above the tree line behind my rental house. I blinked. It was still there. Rational mind racing, I considered explanations. Satellite? Drone? Unusual star? But something about its quality felt wrong. It felt like it was watching me. 3 nights later it happened again. This time the light moved. Not in any predictable pattern. No smooth trajectory like an aircraft. Instead it seemed to pulse, shifting position with jerky, almost mechanical precision. One moment centered, the next skipping several degrees to the left or right, without apparent transition. I started documenting everything. A leather-bound notebook became my companion. Detailed entries chronicled each occurrence. Date, time, duration, movement patterns. Hard data to counter the growing sense of unreality that was consuming my thoughts. My research took me down unexpected paths. Local forums, obscure websites dedicated to unexplained phenomena, cryptozoology message boards where people shared experiences that sounded both incredible and, to me, uncomfortably familiar. Most dismissed such accounts as fantasy, but some descriptions matched my experience with unsettling precision. Accounts of creature sightings in rural Wisconsin, unexplained aerial phenomena reported across Midwestern states, patterns that suggested something more than isolated incidents. Sleep became a battlefield. Every creak of the house, every rustle outside my window triggered an adrenaline response. I'd find myself sitting upright, heart racing, stomach churning, scanning darkness for any hint of movement. Exhaustion and paranoia began to blur together. The lights continued. Sometimes multiple points of illumination, sometimes a single persistent glow that seemed to study the landscape and me with calculated patience. I was being watched, and whatever was watching seemed to be getting closer. The human mind is a delicate mechanism. Push it too far, and the carefully constructed walls of rationality begin to crumple like wet paper. My work started to suffer first. Spreadsheets that once made perfect sense became landscapes of confusion. Numbers danced across my screen, refusing to align. My supervisor called me into her office, a crisp, clinical space that felt more like an interrogation room than a performance review. "Is everything all right?" she asked, her eyes scanning my recent reports. I wanted to tell her about the lights, about the impossible creature I'd seen. Instead, I mumbled something about stress and I promised to do better. I wasn't sleeping, at least not really. Each night became a marathon of vigilance. I positioned myself near windows, notebook in hand, watching, waiting. The world outside my rental seemed to pulse with a hidden rhythm, a secret language just beyond my comprehension. My apartment transformed. What was once a carefully organized space became a war room of investigation. Bulletin boards covered the walls, connected by a web of red string. Printouts from obscure websites. Local maps marked with precise locations of my encounters. Photographs taken at odd hours, capturing fragments of unexplained illumination. Friends stopped calling. Text messages went unanswered. My social circle shrank to a pinpoint of isolation. Jake from work approached me one afternoon, genuine concern etched across his face. "Hey," he said, "we're worried about you." I laughed. The sound surprised even me. Sharp and slightly unhinged. Researching became an obsession. I discovered a network of similar accounts. Whispered stories of creatures that didn't belong in our understanding of reality. Encounters documented in hushed tones, shared by people who understood the weight of being a witness. My sleep patterns disintegrated. I'd catch maybe 2 hours each night, interrupted by constant surveillance. Energy drinks and cold coffee became my sustenance. My body grew thin, muscles tensed like coiled wire. I started recording everything I could. Voice memos, handwritten journals, digital timestamps of each unusual occurrence. My phone filled with hundreds of photographs, most capturing nothing more than darkness. but each representing a moment of potential revelation. The lights continued their mysterious dance across the night skies, sometimes multiple points of illumination, sometimes a single persistent glow. Paranoia wasn't a choice. Paranoia was life. I installed additional security cameras, motion-activated lights. I reinforced locks on every entrance. My rental became a fortress, although against what I wasn't even sure. Colleagues began to whisper. I caught fragments of conversation, concerned glances, hushed discussions about my mental state, but they didn't understand. They couldn't comprehend the magnitude of what I was experiencing. My research revealed fragmented accounts of similar phenomena, cryptozoology forums, paranormal investigation websites. Each story felt like a piece of a larger and more terrifying puzzle. My weight dropped. My suits hung loose. My belts cinched tighter with each passing week. Dark circles beneath my eyes transformed from temporary exhaustion to a permanent landscape of investigation and fear. I was becoming something else. A witness. A recorder. A keeper of impossible truths. The boundary between what I knew and what I suspected grew increasingly blurred. Reality felt malleable. A thin membrane ready to tear at any moment, revealing something profound and terrifying underneath. Something was coming, and I was the only one who seemed to recognize its approach. 2 weeks had transformed me into a shell of my former self. My world had narrowed to a single point of desperate anticipation, waiting, watching, knowing something was returning. It happened on a Tuesday. Not the dramatic night I'd imagined, but a mundane evening that felt like any other. I had been monitoring my security cameras, the blue-white glow of multiple screens, casting strange shadows across my living room. Takeout containers littered the coffee table. Weeks of research, printouts, maps, fragmented notes, created a chaotic landscape around me. The motion-activated lights outside flickered. Once. Twice. I froze. Something was different about this moment. The air itself seemed to change, thickening, becoming viscous, with an impossible tension. My breathing stopped, ears straining against the silence. Then, movement. Not on the cameras, not in the carefully monitored zones I'd established, but outside somewhere, to the left of my garage, where the shadows gathered most densely. A shape emerged. Not human, not animal. Something fundamentally wrong with its structure. Limbs that bent at impossible angles. A form that seemed to absorb surrounding darkness rather than reflect it. Taller than before, more deliberate in its movements. This wasn't just a chance encounter. This felt like an arrival. My body refused to move. Muscles locked in pure primal terror. The creature stood completely still, observing my house with an intelligence that defied explanation. Its eyes, those impossible yellow orbs, seemed to penetrate walls, to see beyond physical barriers. Memories of my research crashed through my mind. Fragmented accounts, whispered stories, encounters documented in hushed tones by those who had witnessed something beyond comprehension. This was different from our first meeting. This felt like a deliberate communication. Seconds stretched into an eternity. The creature didn't approach, didn't make a sound, simply existed in a space that shouldn't accommodate its impossible anatomy. My hand, shaking uncontrollably, reached for my phone. Documentation had become my lifeline, proof that I wasn't losing my mind. No signal. The phone's screen remained dark, dead. A low frequency began to pulse. Not a sound exactly, more like a vibration that originated somewhere between my ears and the base of my skull. A communication that bypassed traditional sensory understanding. Messages, fragments, impressions. Not words, not language, but something more profound. A communication that suggested vast, incomprehensible intelligence. We are watching. You are observed. This is not your space. The revelation hit me with physical force. This wasn't a random encounter. This was intentional and planned. I was being studied. My rental, my carefully constructed sanctuary, suddenly felt microscopic, vulnerable. A glass box with transparent walls offering no protection. The creature remained motionless, but its presence expanded, filled every corner of my perception. Something would have to change. I couldn't live like this, constantly vigilant, always watching, trapped between what I knew and what I suspected. When the shape finally moved, it did so with grace, sliding between shadows like water. No sound, no disruption of surrounding environment, simply gone. But the impact remained. I knew with absolute certainty that my life had irrevocably changed. Whatever connection had been established would not simply disappear. This was only the beginning, unless I left. Breaking my lease became the only logical solution. Leaving wasn't just about changing addresses. It was about survival. A calculated retreat from a reality that had fundamentally shattered my understanding of the world. The lease termination process became a surgical operation of precision and desperation. My landlord stared bewildered as I methodically explained my immediate need to vacate. His skeptical eyes tracked my trembling hands, the dark circles beneath my eyes speaking volumes about my recent experiences. Personal emergency, I stated, sliding the official termination document across his desk. Non-negotiable. Packing revealed how much my life had transformed. What once was a carefully organized living space now looked like an investigator's evidence room. Bulletin boards covered with interconnected photographs. Notebooks filled with meticulous observations. Surveillance equipment scattered across surfaces, like archaeological artifacts documenting an impossible encounter. I retained only essential documents, research materials, photographs, anything that might provide future context to what I'd been experiencing. My colleagues at the accounting firm watched my rapid unraveling with a mixture of concern and uncomfortable distance. Jake, who had been my closest work friend, attempted intervention multiple times. "Are you okay?" he asked. "Because you've changed." Changed. Such a simple word for such a profound transformation. Moving became an exercise in psychological reconstruction. I selected a new apartment in a densely populated urban area. Constant human activity. Minimal darkness. Maximum visibility. Protection through proximity and noise. The new space felt sterile, intentionally bland. White walls. Minimal decorations. Nothing that could capture lingering energies from my previous encounters. My mother called repeatedly during the relocation process. Concern etched into every conversation. "Are you sure you're all right?" she'd ask, that maternal intuition sensing that something fundamental had shifted. I offered practiced reassurances, carefully constructed narratives that revealed very little. Protection wasn't just physical. It was about maintaining psychological boundaries, too. Nights remained challenging. Sleep became a battlefield between exhaustion and vigilance. Every sound, every shadow, potential harbingers of return. Witnesses carry burdens others cannot comprehend. My encounters transformed from terrifying experiences into something more nuanced. A profound understanding that reality contains infinitely more complexity than human perception allows. Documentation became my lifeline, not to prove anything, not to convince anyone, besides me. Simply to maintain a record, evidence that something extraordinary existed beyond conventional understanding. I returned to my professional life and it continued. Accounting provided structure. Mathematical precision offered a counterbalance to the fundamental uncertainty I now carried with me. But underneath, always underneath, the recognition remained that I was now different, changed at a cellular level by an encounter that defied explanation. That impossible creature, those impossible lights, they weren't random occurrences, they represented something fundamental, a reminder that our perceived reality represents merely a thin membrane covering vast, incomprehensible dimensions. I would remain vigilant, always watching, always documenting. Some truths exist beyond traditional explanation, beyond scientific method, beyond comfortable human perception. And I have now become their keeper. We're moving and grooving like nothing's wrong because we got a donation from John Carnagan. Please join me in thanking channel member John Carnagan for making this episode possible. He donated to us using our Super Thanks button located under every one of our videos on YouTube. As a channel member, John Carnagan gets to see our weekly secret uncensored episodes like the 2 we have coming out this week, including I Fed My Cheating Husband to the Dogman. For more information about how you can help this channel stay online, like John Carnagan, here's our international TV spokesmongrel, Henry Lee Dogman. Hank. Thanks, Biggie. And thanks to all of you for watching this far. If you liked it, please click like. If you'd like to see more of our work, please subscribe. And also click that bell icon if you'd like to be notified when we put out a new episode. To become an executive producer, you can donate to us through the thanks button under each of our videos, or through our paypal.me/PeterBernard209 page. To receive cool perks like secret uncensored Dogman episodes far too wild to ever run on this channel, you can become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button, or join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Joining either at the $3 a month level or above gets you access to our over 25 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories available nowhere else. Do you have a scary story about Dogman or some other kind of high strangeness that happened to you? Let us know by emailing us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or by leaving us a voicemail message at 804-LA-SCARY. You may need to call back on that one. It cuts off after, I think, 3 minutes. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, thank you for simply watching to the end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.